Do you know your past? Do you know where it is? It's only where you think. Do you know that every relationship you have, close your eyes, just close your eyes. Just close them. Okay, where's your husband? Where's your wife? Where are your children, your grandchildren? Where's your ex-spouse? They're all in your mind. Open your eyes. Now they're gone. Close your eyes. There they are again. They're just in your mind. You carry your relationships around in your mind. And if your thoughts about your relationships are on what is wrong, what you don't like, what you hate, what they did to you, that will be your experience. And you will materialize or manifest more and more of that pain into your life. If you look at what you love about them and make that the focus of your attention, that will be the nature of your relationship. It's the greatest secret in making any relationship work. It's so simple. Always focus on what you love if you want that to expand in your life. When you look at someone that you're in a relationship with, look at what you love. Because what you think about is what expands. I'll be talking about that a little bit later on. About not giving energy to the things you don't want. Because what you think about is what expands. And if what you're thinking about what you don't want, then more of what you don't want will just keep showing up. It's the only way it works. So now I'd suggest to everybody in this room and everybody listening that you take an eraser to all of the wounds of your past and you just send them away. And don't make them your calling card anymore. And bring the presence of God to those problems. And the presence of God is nothing more than a higher, faster energy. It's all energy. Everything is energy. As Einstein said, nothing happens until something moves. And spiritual energy is just energy that moves very fast and at very high frequencies. And problematic energy is very slow and very low frequencies. And when high, fast frequencies are put in the face of low, slow energies, they are nullified. They dissipate. They can't survive. There's a song that they sing at a lot of the churches that I speak in. It says, "Surely the presence of God is in this place." It's a great affirmation. Anytime, or the affirmation from A Course in Miracles, I can choose peace rather than this. But surely the presence of God is in this place. Every time that I have a conflict with one of my children or with any place, I just bring that line to bear on what is I am experiencing right now. I just bring that line to bear. Surely the presence. Because there's no place that God is not. As the little child in India in the 7th century, who was an avatar, who was really God in a human form, and everywhere he would go, people would be healed just by being in his presence, just like St. Francis. He'd be seen in the village, he'd be seen in the valley at the same time. Lights would emanate from his body wherever he would go, and everyone in the village knew that this was a child of God. This was God in their village without the benefit of an ego. This was an egoless being who had shown up in their village, which is what I believe our great spiritual teachers were. Like there's ways to reach highest levels of consciousness. One of them is to take on an ego and then spend a big hunk of your life seeing if you can shed as much of it as you can. Which has been my path. But there's another one where you just show up and you never take on an ego in the first place. There's only been a handful of those in recorded history. And this little child was one of them. And the elders in the tribe knew that this was God in a human form. And they went up to the little boy and they said to him, trying to bribe him, "I'll give you an orange," they said, "if you can tell me where God is." And the little boy, without hesitating, said, "I'll give you 2 oranges if you can tell me where God isn't." It's one of the very fundamental precepts of this entire program, is that there's only one power in the universe, and that is the power of God. And that whenever we see evil, It's nothing more than love going in the wrong direction, away from its source. And all we have to do is figure out a way to get it to turn around and start returning to its source. Because there's only one power in the universe. And every time we think that we are in something that isn't good, like a problem, like disorder, disharmony, disease, discomfort, what we've done is we've used our mind to create a separation from God. And as long as we are moving away from that source, from that spirit, as long as we're moving opposite of that, those problems continue to manifest. But if we can somehow figure out a way to turn around and move back in that direction, we can eliminate it.
The softer you are, the less rigid you are, the more flexible you are as a person, the more you can accomplish. And this is a great way to practice in parenting as well. And this idea that a rigid thought, how many times have you heard this idea that if I tell you something, I'm going to stay consistent with it. We have a set of rules, these are the rules, and we'll do it this way. In the Tao it says the more rules you make, the more rule breakers you create. It's true. The more rules you have in your house about how everything has to go. We had in our house, my wife would have a big jar of M&Ms. Peanuts, you know, all these different multicolored ones. And the kids in our house, because we didn't feed them sugar and we didn't give them sodas and stuff like that. So they were just more like a decoration. Every once in a while someone would take them. They'd hardly ever be replaced. Now when we had kids come over to our house who weren't ever allowed to have such horrible things, you should have seen their behavior. You know, they would scoop them up, they'd be putting them in their pockets, and they'd get their purses, and they'd open it up, and, you know, the whole thing would be empty. I'd say, well, what are you doing? He said, well, you mean you could just have these whenever you want them? I said, well, we don't really have any rules about that. It's just, it's not something that we encourage or discourage. It's just there. It's like Emerson had a wonderful line. He said, a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. A foolish consistency, a rigid consistency. So that there are many people who will say, if I say it on Monday, you can be absolutely certain that on Wednesday I'm going to believe the same thing, regardless of what might happen on Tuesday. Now Tuesday might have something real that you might want to be changing your mind. You might want to say, you know, I thought that this time, but now I've seen this, and now we can shift. And you can see how this can become and so much about the Tao is on leadership. Leadership in the family, leadership in the community, leadership geopolitically. Less rigidity, more openness, more willingness to listen and say, I changed my mind. Because a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. And what I believed on Wednesday has changed because of what happened on Tuesday. Now, another important thing to say to your children, to your friends, to your lover, to your spouses, to whomever, to the people you work with, words that we're so terrified to say, but which give us a sense of living with the Tao. I don't know. I don't know. I'll look it up. Say it. I don't know. Doesn't hurt. Say it again. I don't know. Isn't it fearful? I mean, so many people, and it's like very freeing, because my kids ask me something, and I say, I don't know. They say, Dad, you know everything. You know everything. I said, well, I don't know that, and I'll look it up, or we'll try to find an answer to that, but I don't quite know. I know that even, you know, I spent 20 years running, and I ran every day for 20 years, for 22 years, without missing a day. 8 miles. Never missed a day. That's rigid. All right? Some call that obsessive. But you brush your teeth every day, I used to say, and you don't call that obsessive. And you go to the bathroom every day, and you don't say, well, he's obsessively doing that again today. You don't do that. But anyway, what I learned is that even in the world of exercise, there are certain things that are built in to make us rigid, to make us stiff, to make us hard. and we lift, and we run, and we kick, and this is what we call working out. There's another kind of working out that is ancient. It goes back to the time of Lao Tzu and before, which is called yoga. And yoga means union. It means union with your source. And when you do yoga, you can stay in the same place. You can do the equivalent of 8 miles. When I used to run 8 miles, I had to run 4 miles that way, turn around, 4 miles back. And I'd be sweating. Now I can do yoga, and I can just stand in one place. And in 90 minutes, by being supple, by making myself stretch, by not being hard and rigid, I can get that out there, I can get that leg up, I can do these kinds of things, and 90 minutes later, it's like I'm totally sweating and I feel so different. I used to, when I would go out at night to eat or something, after running so many miles, running marathons and doing those things, I'd go to get up and it would be, okay, it's going to take a little while, because everything was so, that doesn't happen anymore, because I've given up hard. I've given up being rigid and substituted it for being supple, for being flexible, for living a life in which I don't have to always be so fierce. Listen to this verse of the Tao Te Ching. It's one of my all-time favorites, verse number 76. A man is born gentle and weak. At his death, he becomes hard and stiff. All things, including the grass and the trees, are soft and pliable in life, dry and brittle in death. Stiffness is thus a companion in death. Flexibility is a companion in life. And it's not just for how you exercise, it's how you think. How you think.
Yes, ma'am. What is your first name? It's Dana.
One of the challenges that I have in my own personal development is that I love what you say. I want it. When I get challenged, I find it difficult for my heart. How do you get your heart and your brain to be congruent?
Thanks. That's a great question. You get your heart and your brain to be congruent the same way you learn to hit a backhand in tennis. The same way you learn how to play a game of chess. The same way you learn how to set your VCR. The same way you learn how to meditate. You do it not just with practice, but you do it with a commitment to it. And when you have a commitment to it, you are raising your energy level. And I'll speak a lot here in this program about energy and energy levels. And very often the reason our heart is not congruent with our thoughts is because we allow ourselves to become immersed in lowered energy fields. And we allow, people say to me so often, what you say sounds great, but you don't know what it's like to be in my family, you don't know what it's like to be around my children, you don't know what it's like where I work. I'm in a world which is, noisy, which is rude, which is filled with hatred and so on. What do I do about that? And I always say, who were the most influential people that ever walked on this planet? And what did they have to teach us? That's what you want to go to. What did Jesus say to us? What did Moses say to us? What did Buddha say? What did Muhammad? These weren't just great teachers. These were people who lived at a higher energy field, who sent love in response to hate, who sent joy in response to sadness, who had forgiveness in their hearts as the only thing that they had to give away. You practice that. You practice it, and you stop yourself when you find yourself moving. It's like with the backhand. When you go to hit your backhand and all of a sudden you hit one and it goes over the fence, you don't keep doing that. You don't just keep saying, well, I just can't help it. It just keeps going over the... You stop and you make the correction instantaneously, at the moment. And if you start to practice it before long, it doesn't take very long. It's like I told you about the woman who was the prostitute up in Seattle. I mean, she made a decision that she was no longer going to be a victim in her life, and she was no longer going to be, and she was addicted to one of the strongest substances and she changed overnight, and she's never gone back.
She made a heart connection. And I always say, I repeat the prayer of St. Francis every day, 2 or 3 times a day. And when I repeat that prayer, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Those are 7 chapters in Spiritual Solution to Every Problem. And he said, "O Lord, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console. To be loved as to love. To be understood as to understand. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying to self that we are born to eternal life." I just repeat that, and there's such energy in that. Eknath Eswaran taught me about the energy in that prayer. He said, carry it around with you. Carry that around with you. Just keep it in your pocket. It's right here in my pocket. I always have it with me. And the energy is always there. And it's just a very subtle kind of reminder. And the other thing I would say about keeping congruence is to turn it over to something that you're connected to, but that is higher than the energy of your thoughts. Turn it over to God, in other words. Just turn it over and watch and see what happens. These kinds of events of people walking by and saying, "Is this your strawberry ice cream?" And you say, "Wow, I was just thinking about that. Ooh, what's going on? How did that happen? Where did that come from?" Or you're thinking about your sister and you're just having a conversation with her. You haven't seen her in 5 years and you go to the phone and she's calling, or, endless numbers of these kinds of synchronistic events that almost like you have a collaboration with fate they become more frequent, they become more noticeable. They aren't something that you say, "Oh, how could this happen? Isn't that interesting?" Or it's just chaos, because there's no such thing as chaos,
no,
is there?
It's only the appearance of chaos. There is nothing in chaos. It's like when you go to, say, let's say you go to New York City, and the best example I can use of chaos is Grand Central Station. Okay,
yeah.
So everybody is going hither and thither every which way and what, and you think it's chaotic. But each person is going to a specific destination. And not only that, if you were to announce a track change from track 11 to track 10, you'd see a further intensification of the chaos. But in fact, it is an elaboration of the underlying order. So in all this seeming chaos, there's an underlying order. And it's not only that you should go and get flowers wherever you go. The Vedic expression is, when you're in that state, then wherever you go, flowers will bloom.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for them. You choose where you want to go, and the flowers will bloom on your path.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, I know that. I do. And I've seen it happen, and I believe you can take this kind of consciousness and make it work, not only for you, but for those around you, or for the world. That the thoughts, the images, the vision, the ability to manifest, to create what you want for yourself. You see, if enough of us in the world believe, for example, in a nuclear holocaust, just taking it to something that affects all of us, and certainly all of our children who are going to inherit this place from it. If enough of us believe that exists, doesn't it? I mean, that's a consciousness. And if enough of us believe it, we will collectively begin to act upon that consciousness, that fear, if you will. Because fear is really, to me, there's like fear and love in there. I mean, hate isn't the opposite of love. Fear is the opposite of love. When you eradicate the fear, like if I'm afraid of something happening, an opinion that somebody might have of me, somebody doing something to me that might not, somebody taking my money away from me, somebody, an IRS audit, whatever it may be that is fearful, I'm creating those pheromones that you were talking about, those fearful pheromones. I like that. That could be a rock group. The fearful pheromones. Watch, they'll be on TV tomorrow. You create that. When I have that fearful thought, I find myself, I use a technique that I'm writing about in Real Magic, where I just say, I use the word next.
Just like, okay, here's that thought, and I say to myself, next. Like that thought, I don't need that fearful thought, or that fearful thought is going to create the very thing that it is that I'm anticipating. So I just remind myself of next, and the stress inside, the anxiety, whatever, seems to dissipate, and I substitute fear with love, with harmony, with bliss, with ease, with whatever you want to call that. And the minute that I do that, the minute that I just shift that thought, my physiology changes. I am creating molecules with my mind that create love and harmony instead of fear, and the problem is gone.
Unconditional love is really nothing more than the absence of fear. The ego is where fears originate, with constant messages that you are incomplete and need more, that you need to win to be better in comparison to others. With its unceasing pressure, the ego keeps you in a constant state of turmoil and anxiety. Here is where all fears are birthed and nurtured within you. To accept unconditional love as your premise for living, you will have to tell the ego that there is no need to prove anything, and that all you want or hope for is already here. With this kind of declaration, fear is removed from your life and is replaced with love. Remember the biblical quote, "Perfect love casteth out all fear."